It is to note that a great deal of issue is caused by the very classification that is supposed to ensure the rights of mutants. Whenever we awaken our power, we lose the legal camaraderie of the mundane community to which we are born to. Overnight, we go from native to foreign with no map of how to get home. Signatories without signatures. A state without a nation. 1989. First day of school. My name is Mary Bittir, like the flavor, and I was born a mutant. I didn't know I was a mutant until I was 8. I always had the ability to remember things better than other kids, and even help them remember things. None of us thought this was strange. It wasn't until one day in art class, when we were told to draw a picture of a wedding. My teacher told me the story of her own wedding, when I said I had trouble imagining a real one. And I saw it in my mind, the way I always saw stuff in my mind. I turned it in, and the day after I was called into the counselor's office. My teacher, the school counselor, and 2 men in suits were there. The men were from the Department of Demi-Humans. Apparently, I drew my teacher's wedding in a detail that should have been impossible unless I was there. A week of testing later, it was confirmed. I was a mutant. Now here I am, on my first day of high school, at West Progress High. I survived evaluation day, though I didn't excel in any field, which was perfectly fine by me. I walked up to the school door, ready to make this the best day possible. That's when a voice spoke up. "Nervous?" the voice said. It was deep, and seemed to know the answer to its question. Turning, I saw a rather built and tall man carrying a crate that was as big as him on one shoulder. "No. What makes you think that?" was all I could say back. "Because the school doesn't even open for another hour," he said, going by. "The nervous ones either show up late or way too early." Oh, I checked the door, and it was in fact locked. I turned and looked around the schoolyard. It was empty. I had noticed that, but I had simply thought I was the first one here. Which I was. Which is what I wanted. I had planned on making a good impression on the teachers. But now it seemed I was just making a fool of myself at the very first chance I had. Maybe he wouldn't remember me. "Don't worry too much about it. More of you will show. Happens every year," the man shouted as he walked on waving. "And don't worry about me. I'm just old Bob the janitor." So here I was, standing in front of the front door of the high school I was going to attend for the next 4 years. I looked up at it, and began to think about my last school, and all the people I knew. I was deep in thought over my decision to come, when another voice snuck up on me. "Hello," said a blonde-haired girl. She was likely another student, as she was wearing the school's uniform. She continued, "I'm Alice Hanson. I'm new here. The school, I mean. But also this country. I'm from Denmark, which I realize means I'm new to everything here." She laughed, showing her nervousness. "I'm sorry. You are? Did I say my name was Alice Hanson?" "Oh, yes you did. And I'm Mary Bittir. I'm also new," I introduced myself. "To this school, and also the city, but not the country." "That makes sense. Most people here likely live here. I mean, I live here too. Well, now I do. Live here. I didn't before." She coughed and cleared her throat. "Sorry. We should head on inside." "It's locked," I said as she reached for the handle and pulled it down. It made the clanking sound of a door not allowed to be open. "Oh," was all Alice said, as she smiled nervously. That was when I noticed it, a long object on her back, tied under her backpack. I immediately asked, "Is that a sword?" Alice turned to face me and tried to hide the sword behind her. "What? No. I mean, yes, it is. A sword. But it's not. That is to say, it's fine," I cut her off. "I was just surprised. I mean, they let you have a sword?" "Well," Alice seemed to be ashamed. "It's kind of important that I keep it with me. Actually, that's the reason why I go here, instead of my old school. It's what makes me a demi-human." She went quiet, clearly thinking about the decisions she had made in her own life. I struggled to think of something to change the mood. "So, do you read any books or comics?" Alice's eyes widened. "Oh yes, do you know the Snow Star series?" I did know it. "Yeah, I really liked it when I was little." "When you were little?" Alice deflated. Oh, okay. I mean, I still do, I blurted out, trying to save the conversation. I just like other stuff too. Stuff in addition to Snow Star. I read all the books and everything. You read all 32 books? Alice seemed renewed. I hadn't. I only knew about 24 books in the series. No. I guess I'm behind a bit. Although I revealed I wasn't up to date about the series, Alice kept her energy. We sat on the steps and started talking about the series and all its publishing. An hour went by. A few more nervous students showed up and made their own groups until a man arrived to unlock the door. He walked with a level of authority that marked him as in charge. Head high, arms behind him, and stride even. This man stepped to the front door and unlocked it with a click. After, he turned and addressed the courtyard full of nervous students. Good morning, students. I am Vice Principal Haruto Thompson. I am commonly called Vice Principal Tom, but you may address me how you wish, so long as you remember the title of my position when you do. Now, please head to your homeroom classes, as the majority of the school's facilities won't be available until tomorrow. Lastly, I am looking forward to everyone enjoying their first day. I expect everyone to be on their best behavior. You only get one first impression. The students had all gathered around the front steps during the vice principal's speech. We all just stood there for a moment until he stepped aside and gestured to allow us in. He continued to simply stand there as we entered. Perfect stance, simple smile, and watchful eyes that scanned every student that passed him. It was then that I noticed that Vice Principal Thompson didn't seem to have any keys on him. They could have been hidden in a pocket, but I didn't see a key before, nor did I hear any jingling, and there didn't seem to be any key-shaped bulges in his clothing. How did he open the door? I asked in a whisper, hoping only Alice would hear. We had been the first to enter, and there were many other students moving about, which is why I was shocked to see the vice principal turn his head just enough to catch my eyes in the corner of his. Unfortunately, that's when my own stride was stopped by Alice, who had stopped in the middle of the hall. I tried to apologize before seeing what had stopped Alice. There at the end of the hall where the path split into 2 more hallways, 2 flights of stairs, and 2 openings for bathrooms, stood 2 people, a man and a woman. The man was taller than the already towering woman, and they wore seemingly heavy coats made of dark leather with bright metal buttons. They had hard expressions on their face and stood the same stance as the vice principal did. Remembering for a moment, I turned back to see that the front door was closed and only other students were in the hallway, also looking at the pair ahead. Report to your homeroom now, the man boomed. Lollygagging is not appreciated. Lollygagging? A boy said, stepping forward. Who the hell says lollygagging? We do, the woman also boomed. Now cease your lollygagging and report to your homeroom. Ha! The boy laughed. He was average height and build, with jet black hair, and seemed to have some kind of aura around him. He stepped closer to the man. And what the hell are you going to... The man punched him. More than punched him. The speed was so fast that only his fist hanging in the air where the boy's face was a moment ago was the only evidence of the movement. The boy was sent flying down the hallway. That, the man returned to stance. Now report to your homeroom before we make you. Now! The crowd started to move in different directions. I checked my schedule as I also moved down the hall, opposite of where the boy was still lying. Are they allowed to do that? Alice asked, surprising me. I had almost forgotten about her. I mean, I heard they can be tough here, but that was a bit much. I didn't have an answer. I had also heard that the school had a more hands-on approach to punishing students, but I was just as concerned. Not even a little. In fact, he got off light, another boy spoke up. He was scrawny with wild golden hair. They're the disciplinary officers, and I heard from my sister that those 2 are ruthless. But he didn't do anything, Alice protested. What? You mean you didn't notice he was focusing his will? The boy asked. I did, I said. But was that really enough to justify that? Maybe not, but that wasn't the point. He was made an example of, Alice said, dropping her gaze to the floor. They wanted to show everyone that they could. Yep, the boy confirmed. And I don't disagree. Everyone needs to learn that power doesn't make you powerful. We walked in silence down the hall until we reached our destination, and we all stopped at the same classroom. Alice looked over her schedule asking, Are we all in Class J? Apparently. The boy walked in. Alice and I followed. The room was a simple setup. It had 28 desks for students, in 4 neat rows, with a large desk in the front for the teacher. There was a chalkboard and cabinets along the walls. On the desk were index cards, folded to prop themselves up. On them, names were written. Seems like we have assigned seats. The boy held up one of the cards, showing a neat font. 09J17. Prince Abraham, which also I assumed was his own name, as he then sat down at the desk it was on. I went to the front of the first row, and there I was, just behind 09J1, Belle Gwendolyn, was my own 09J2, Bitter Mary, and I sat down. I started to unzip my bag when I heard Alice behind me. Oh no! She was looking at another name card on the last desk in the row, showing it to have her own name on it. Her eyes showed the disappointment she felt. I was hoping we could have sat next to each other. It's only for this class, I said. We can hang out between classes, and maybe we'll sit together in them. We don't switch classes, Abraham said, getting his own desk set up. Not for the most part, anyways. We'll cover the main subject with different teachers as they go between classes, and then maybe electives, but we mostly stay here. But most high schools have students go from class to class, I said, and most high schools aren't attended and staffed by demi-humans, Abraham countered. I guess that makes sense, Alice said, and seemed to accept the situation as she sat down and stared at her own name. I went back to my own set, which included a notebook, some pencils, and a large eraser. I then looked at the clock. There was another half hour before class was supposed to start, and I hadn't brought anything to do. I looked over to Abraham. He was looking over a leather-bound book that seemed to be glowing slightly from the pages. I turned to look at Alice. She had produced a book as well. It was paperback and worn. It was a copy of one of the earlier Snowstar books. The third, I guessed, but I wasn't sure. I turned back just in time to see another student enter the class. It was a girl. She was small, so small I thought she was either a teacher's kid or was very lost. But she strolled in swiftly and went straight to the back of the class. I didn't really pay attention as I opened my notebook and started to draw, but she caught my eye again when she returned to the front of the class looking at the name cards. Apparently, she was Gwendolyn Bell, as she took the seat directly in front of me. She then seemed to try to shrink into the seat and become even smaller than what she already was. I thought about it for a moment. She seemed scared, not just nervous or anxious. I decided that I should say something, introduce myself, make myself not a stranger in a strange place. I lifted my hand to tap her shoulder, just as the door opened and a huge figure entered the room. It was massive, covered in scales, and had fangs and claws that could rip any mundane human apart. Good morning, the massive form said in a soft and kind tone. Is this Class J? Abraham answered him, and he gave his thanks before entering fully, and started searching for his own seat right next to mine. I then realized that he was just one of the lizard aliens that crash-landed in Russia centuries ago. I took a breath, but I had lost my nerve. I still wanted to talk to Gwendolyn, but now I was shaking just slightly. I lost my chance as soon more and more students entered the classroom, and the range of them was shocking. I had lived in the mundane world until just a month ago, and now I was seeing the strangest things. A huge boy who looked like he could have been made of stone, another equally large boy with a massive gut, but walked through the desk with grace. A girl with jewels braided in her hair, carrying a trident taller than her. A boy who carried a book and a smug look. A short girl who seemed not to have anything special about her, but walked with godlike confidence. What seemed to be a robot. Even more students entered, and most seemed somewhat normal, but all seeming to have something more. I seemed to be the most normal person in the room, but even I had something more. Something that made me not fully human. That was the purpose of the school, after all. The last student to enter was a boy with an earthy skin tone and black hair. The first thing he did was yawn out of boredom rather than being tired. After he faced the class, and with no care said, Class J, taking the final desk, the class was complete. 28 desks, 28 students, 28 demi-humans, all of them with their own flavor of abnormal. Maybe this was a mistake after all, I thought to myself. Yes, I wasn't a mundane human, but maybe I didn't belong here either. These people weren't just not normal, they were beyond normal, and I was just a mutant. Of course, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The classroom was buzzing with everyone introducing themselves and setting up for the day when the door opened again. Entering the door was a man wearing black. Not a suit, but what seemed to be a sweater, with jeans and sneakers, with only a scarf and belt of golden yellow to break the dark silhouette. The class was stunned as he walked to the blackboard and started to write. "Good morning, class. My name is Mr. Galacto," he said in a flat tone, and stepped back to reveal his name on the board. "Of course, I'm sure many of you already know that. I'm your homeroom teacher. I will also be teaching history. Now, let's take attendance." "No fucking way!" a boy shouted from the back. "You can't be the Mr. Galacto." "Mr. Quetzalcoatl Zapotek, I see you are here." Mr. Galacto checked the box. "All right, then. Gwendolyn Bell." Before Gwendolyn could confirm herself, the boy shouted again. "First off, it's Kevin. Second, you can't be Mr. Galacto. He's a world-class guardian." "Yes, I am aware. That is something to remember. Whenever I get called away to handle situations, I'll have a substitute that you will treat with the same respect you treat me. But we'll go over that later. Now, where was I?" Kevin shouted even louder. "Do you really expect us to just accept that the most powerful demi-human ever is just going to teach a high school class?" "Yes, since that's what's happening. Gwendolyn Bell." Mr. Galacto never looked up. As Gwendolyn raised her hand and tried to speak, Kevin started to say something again, but was cut off. Mr. Galacto swept his arm through the air in a sharp move almost too fast to see, and Kevin was knocked back to the ground. "Enough! One more outburst and I will call the disciplinary officer to handle you. Now, Miss Bell." Gwendolyn finally squeaked out a "here" before he called, "Mary Bittir." I didn't respond at first. I was still in shock. It wasn't until the third time he called, "Mary Bittir." "Yes," I said. "Are you here?" "Yes, I'm here." "Good. Jessica Black." Mr. Galacto continued the call. As a thump sounded out, a chalk eraser was thrown at the board from the back of the class, hitting the chalkboard. Turning, I saw the boy Kevin rubbing his chest as he took his seat again. The class sounded off, one by one, as they were called. Some were excited, others half-hearted. At the end of it, Mr. Galacto set the roll down. "And Mr. Kevin, we already know you're here. Now, moving on." The room erupted. A dozen students had started yelling questions. They were unintelligible, as they simply tried to ask their question louder than the rest. "Enough!" Mr. Galacto lifted his hand, and the room quieted it. "That's one of the first rules. No speaking unless called on. Raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll call on you." A wave of hands went up. "First things first, as I said, I'm your homeroom teacher. I'll be managing your schedules and student files. If you need anything, you can always come to me. Additionally, I'll be your history teacher. Any questions so far?" Not a single hand had dropped. Mr. Galacto seemed to sigh and point to a girl the other side of the class. "Can I have your autograph?" "Any school-related questions?" Mr. Galacto scanned the room. "Why are you teaching high school history?" Kevin asked without being called on. "Because I have extensive knowledge about world history. If I wasn't qualified to teach this class, multiple people would have ensured I didn't," Mr. Galacto said. "Now, let's go over the daily schedule." The day went on until the bell rang. Mr. Galacto left the room and a new teacher entered. Simon Meerman went over the English agenda for the year and dodged questions about Galacto. Another bell introduced us to Arthur Hall and his math syllabus, and one more for Madeline Tuner with science. After her came the bell for lunch. Alice quickly came up to me. "Do you want to have lunch together?" "Sure." And the two of us started to the cafeteria, a section of the school in the middle of the building. It acted as an auditorium with multiple rings of floors around it. The two of us got trays and found a spot. We ate in silence, both with the same question, but neither wanting to ask it. Luckily, others joined us. The jeweled-haired girl sat by us and blurted out, "Can you believe it? The Mr. Galacto! At our school!" "I don't," said Kevin, sitting next to her. "Something has to be up. No way the world's greatest champion is just teaching high school history. As likely as it sounds, that is the exact scenario playing out. An even and knowing voice spoke up. The source was revealed as another student, joining the table by literally hopping up onto the seat. He was of clear African descent, but had an incredibly short stature. Greetings. Samuel York. I suffer from achondroplasia. My bones simply do not grow as they are supposed to. I am classified as a mutant, and my mutation is an increase in cerebellum activity and efficiency. Fuck does that mean? Asked Kevin. I am a super genius midget, answered Samuel. I thought the word for short people was dwarf, was the Jules-haired response. There are many terms for it. Dwarf is one, but dwarves have filed complaints in the past. Samuel's response was quick and sharp, as if he had the answer prepared before the question was even asked, which apparently he did. Now, I believe that takes care of the majority of opening questions for me. Would someone else like to go next? Oh, I'm Samantha, and I'm a warrior of legend, Samantha said, stepping up onto the table. She pointed her trident into the air. Chosen by the greater forces of the universe, I am the embodiment of the Aquarius zodiac. All the nearby students had turned to look at the outburst. They all seemed to be looking at Samantha, but I still felt like they were boring down on me, like they were going from her to me and noticing I didn't belong around someone so bombastic. I glanced over and saw Alice was having a similar experience. Her cheeks at least were turning pink. A yell came through the room. It was the disciplinary officer, the female one, telling Samantha to sit at the tables. Samantha returned to a sitting position, only a bit embarrassed. She turned to Kevin. What about you? What kind of demi-human are you? Fuck you, said Kevin. It's none of your business. He leaned back as Samantha tried to convince him to tell. I don't care about whatever it is that they call you, and I don't want to tell you what I am. I'm not mundane. That's all you need to know. Fine, Samantha huffed, and then turned to Alice. What about you? Oh, me? Well, see... Alice started stumbling over her words. She went on, and I looked over to Kevin. I wondered if he was going to say something. Tried to tell Samantha to back off, but he just sat there. What was his deal? Was he just that selfish? My thoughts went like that until Alice recovered. I have a sword. It was my mother's, and her mother's, and her mother's, for generations. Like a legendary weapon of destiny? Samantha's eyes were almost sparkling as Alice agreed. Oh man, that's so cool! Let's be friends! She scooted closer until she was next to Alice. We can train together! Kevin made a noise of dismissal at Samantha, and Samuel chimed in. What about you? I remember your name to be Mary Bittir. The table was looking at me as I said, Me? Oh, I'm just a mutant. The weight of the air increased as everyone at the table looked at me. I didn't dare look around, but I could feel glares from everywhere, as if they all knew my confession. After a while, Samuel said to me, There's no such thing as just a mutant. What's the significant result of your mutation? Yeah, what's your power? Samantha leaned over the table and Alice. Do you shoot fire? Lift things with your mind? She gasped with a thought. Can you read minds? She went quiet with an intense stare directly at me. I only realized later that she was likely trying to speak to me in her mind. No, I just remember stuff, I said. Not much of a power, Kevin said with an edge of suspicion in his voice. I remember stuff really well, I quickly added. Also, I can remember stuff for other people. That sounds like mind reading, but more, said Alice. It's not. I can't just invade someone's mind, but I can recall experiences with great detail and share them with others, I explained. Does that make sense? Nope, answered Kevin, who decided to just eat his meal and ignore the rest of the table. How do you trigger this power? Samuel asked. I just do, and I have to touch others to share it, I answered. Well, that sounds like studying will be really easy for you, Alice said with a chuckle. It won't. I started to eat my own meal as the table fell silent. It was broken by Samantha talking about food. Kevin didn't react. Samuel entered only a few words. Alice picked at her tray for the hour. Soon the lunch period was over, and everyone started moving back to their classes. Well, Kevin stood up. It's not that I didn't enjoy this. I didn't, but that's not important. I'm heading on out. Tell Mr. G I said... He walked away without saying a message, which I realized was probably the message. Where are you going? Samantha called. Wherever I want. And that was all Kevin gave us as he left for the front of the school. Is he leaving the school? Asked Alice. Seems like it, said Samuel. If you remember, after homeroom, we have standard classes, then lunch, then another homeroom period, which is followed by our elective classes. I assume he has no electives, and thus is simply skipping the rest of the day. We can do that? Samantha was shocked at the idea, as was me and Alice. No! Samuel literally jumped down from his seat and waddled in the direction of their classroom. We all joined him. Entering the hall, Samuel pushed the button on his belt and asked if he could hold onto one of our belts. I have wheels in my shoes to easily match anyone's pace. Kevin was my ride here, but now he's gone. Samantha volunteered. That's cool, Sam. Can I call you Sam? You can call me Sam. Or Sammy. Sam and Sammy. Actually, I prefer either my full given name, Samuel, or my family name, York, Samuel said. What if I gave you a kiss? Samantha asked with a coo. Well, I am open to negotiation. Samantha burst out in laughter at that. Alice leaned over me. I don't get it. Are they flirting? I don't know, I said back. I think maybe. We returned to class, and there was Mr. Galacto, sitting in the front reading a newspaper. We took our seats and waited. When the bell rang again, Mr. Galacto stood up and turned to the class. All right, then. Your first day of school is almost done. In 5 minutes, you'll be allowed to go to your extra classes. Those who don't have extra classes are welcome to leave for the day, but you don't have to. The library, gym, and other non-restricted parts of the school is still open to you until 8 o'clock sharp. With that said, please note that you are still required to attend this closing day class. Something Mr. Kevin will be notified of tomorrow. Now, any questions? There were none, and soon the bell rang once again, and everyone moved. We separated at the classroom door and more at intersections, joining with other students of other classes. The sight was nerve-wracking. So many seemed so normal, but throughout were figures that clearly showed their other half. Mary, are you also in luxury reading? Alice shouted as she fell in stride with me. You're going the same way as we are. I looked back to see that we was the giant alien lizard boy. He waved and smiled with his rows of fangs. Yeah, was all I could squeak. That's so cool, Alice said, jumping with joy. Vlad was telling me how he grew up reading Snow Star too. Vlad? I asked. Vladimir Ivanov. Call me Vlad. Priano. He extended his claws to me. I looked at it stunned. Mary? Said Alice. What's wrong? Are you okay? Oh, it's okay. Vlad was the one to respond. Really, I get it all the time outside of oddness. People from the mundane world are always scared of us Ludoyache. What? No. Mary's not scared of you. Right, Mary? I was. Vlad was twice my size and infinitely more capable of violence. I was only alive because Vlad didn't want to kill me. I reached for a handshake, holding myself still as my bones shook inside of me. Of course, just the first I've met a Ludoyache. But still, Priano. He placed only 2 of his digits into my grasp, which was still bigger than my whole hand. As I tried to remain calm, Vlad smiled again, and with that it happened. My powers exploded in me, and I reached into Vlad. I started to feel Vlad's feelings. He was somewhere, surrounded by others of his kind. They looked at him, speaking in a tongue he didn't fully understand. They walked about him, their scarred hides showing their battle experience, and started to ask questions. I stepped back and tripped on something, causing me to fall backwards. Soon Alice was by me, helping me stand and asking me if I was okay. Vlad stepped forward. He asked what happened, but before I could say anything to explain, a boy I hadn't seen yet stepped between us. Back off, lizard! The boy brandished a baseball bat. If you know what's good for you! Vlad did step back. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. The boy turned his head enough to see me. "You all right?" "Yes," I said. "You don't have to—" I trailed off, looking for the right word. But I didn't have to. "All right, then." He stepped back to be even with me. "You're Mary Bittir, right?" "I am. How did you know?" "The Brotherhood stands," was his explanation as he thumped his chest. "If you need anything, you just let us know, all right?" And with that, he left, all the while keeping an eye on Vlad. "Who was that?" Alice asked. "Why did he threaten you like that?" "He's a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants," Vlad explained. "He was just trying to protect Mary. It's okay." "No, it isn't," said Alice. "He just threatened you, Vlad. He can't just do that. We need to tell a teacher. Please, it's fine. Stuff like that is common here." Vlad raised his hands, pleading. A voice called down from the hall. "Get to your classes! No lollygagging!" It was the male disciplinary officer. He was facing us and looked annoyed. Alice started running to him. Sir, there was a boy here. He threatened my friend." "And why did he do that?" the disciplinary officer asked. His coat squared his bulk and looked down at us as Alice explained the scene. The officer looked to Vlad. "Could you have taken him?" To which Vlad sheepishly stammered, "Well, I'm a pacifist, but I'm not helpless. Plus, I'm pretty good at running away." "Then I don't see the problem." The disciplinary officer stared down at Alice. "What do you mean? He threatened to attack my friend," Alice pleaded. "And your friend can take care of himself. I have more important things to worry about. Now get to class!" The disciplinary officer walked away from them without another look. "But—" was all Alice managed, as she watched him with defeat and confusion on her face. Vlad walked up to her and placed a claw on her shoulder. "You're on the odd side of the world. Things just work like this. I really could have taken care of myself." That doesn't make it—" Alice started, but cut herself off. "Let's go." We started again towards our class in the now empty halls. "For whatever it's worth," I said after a few steps, "I didn't think it was right either. I mean, I never even met another demi-human before coming here. Not even another mutant. I don't know why he did that." "The Brotherhood of Mutants is passionate about their agenda," said Vlad, and we continued in silence until we got to our class. The class itself was fine. It was more of a book club. Alice and Vlad shared their love for Snowstar, and soon fell into a discussion about the difference between the original Russian version and the Scandinavian translation. They both agreed that the English version was the worst version. "Of course it is," another girl said smugly. "Those are little kids' books with a lot of fancy details. They can't just translate it straight and expect kindergartners to read it." "I guess that makes sense," Alice chuckled. "I just think they didn't do well with the Night Castle scenes. They described everything so hard." "Oh, yes. Stone blacker than black and darker than night. It's easy for kindergartners to get it. In fact, shouldn't you be getting back there soon?" She pointed at Alice, and the class started to giggle. Alice, finally noticing that she was being made fun of, reddened and sat next to Vlad. The class's laughter grew until the teacher called for silence. The room was quiet as I turned to look at the girl. "How do you know about the Night Castle?" "It was only introduced in the 22nd book, which was only published in English 2 years ago." At first I was just curious about how she knew the description of the Night Castle, but something about her smug look kept me going and added, "Are you in the 3rd grade?" The boom as a few other students laughed turned the girl red in anger, and she stood up. But before she could do anything, the teacher slammed her hand onto the desk. "Enough! This class is about reading to enjoy reading. We read recreationally, not competitively. Remember that." The girl sat down as the other students near her continued to tease her. The class continued on as we all discussed our favorite and recent books. We talked about adaptations that were done, both good and bad. At the end, the teacher assigned that we pick and read a new book, and that we'll be writing essays about how far we got into them. After that, class was over. I didn't have another class today, so I decided to head to the library. I invited Alice, but she frowned. "Sorry," she said. "I have another class. It's an important one." She seemed sad about it. "It's fine," I tried to comfort her. "I'm just going to pick out a book for the assignment." "I have some recommendations if you want," Vlad offered. I thought I had grown used to his bulk, but I still jumped when he offered. He may have noticed because he followed it. "But I have some family business. But if you see any books that are more nicked than others, I would probably recommend those." "Thank you," I said and turned to Alice. "I'll see you tomorrow, Alice." With that, I headed off to the school library. The school's library was massive, larger than any public library I've ever seen, with shelves going up over 30 feet high. I stared up at the selection. There were books on every subject from every source. As I walked through the narrow alleys, sweeping my gaze across every spine, I noticed that some of them were in different languages. I even opened a few to check, and they were indeed written in other languages. It was so strange, even for a place of such oddness. Everything else was welcomed and even celebrated. Continuing, I noticed a book with a scratch on it. It was in Russian, I think. Searching more, I found books that were damaged. Not enough to be removed, but clearly used with stronger and tougher hands than mundane ones. Some were scratched up, some were bent, and some seemed to be slightly burnt. Others still had stranger wear and tear. I kept looking, and started to gather those that seemed promising. Before long, I had a small stack. I was looking more at my choices when I saw them. On the back wall, taking a whole shelf all by themselves, were the Snowstar books. Far more than 32 books stretched across the whole wall, filling the row. I looked over them and saw that they were different translations, and that they had the whole series in English. I grabbed the latest one. It was English, but there were parts where the book threw in translator notes. Checking the cover, I saw it said under the author's name, "Translated by Sarah Cecil." I added the book to my stack and started to the front to find the librarian. A large bearded man with a bald head and thick framed glasses on his face. I set the books on the counter. "Student ID. It acts as your library card," he said, grabbing the books and started to scan them. I handed my student ID over and asked, pointing to the translator's name, "Excuse me, but who's Sarah Cecil?" He looked at it. "That's me. I'm Sarah Cecil." He pointed to the nameplate on the desk saying, "Mr. S. Cecil." "Your name is Sarah?" "According to the IRS and my mom it is. Why you ask?" He placed the books in front of me. "You translated the Snowstar series?" "Yes, and many others. I only translate text into English though, so sorry if you want something in another language." I waved my hand. "That's fine. I was curious about, well, why and how you do it." "Simple. So students can enjoy them. Knowing and or learning English is a requirement for attending Progress City High School. As for how? Tediously. That's how." I nodded, not knowing how to ask my next question. "The English Snowstar is only published up to 24, but you have all 32 here. Why aren't these out in the public?" "Copyright law. The school can self-publish whatever it wants, but it can only distribute them through the library system. In fact, I know the other 3 high schools have their own translations. Even the colleges do, since they're under the same law." "The colleges have Snowstar books?" "Hell yeah, they do. Snowstar is awesome," he said with a smile and handed me my books. I left after that and headed home. My new home was an apartment building just a mile away. Easy to walk to. I entered and headed up the stairs to the 3rd floor and to apartment 3B, where I've called home for more than a month now. I stepped in and called for my mom, and got no response. Empty. I wasn't surprised. She was probably out shopping or looking for a job to fill her day. We didn't pay rent since I was a student, but we still needed to buy stuff. I sat on the couch to read and chose the Snowstar book to start with. By the time I was on the 6th page, I remembered that this was the 32nd book in the series, and quickly realized I was way behind. There were characters and items that I had never heard of, and mentions of events I'd never read, but I just continued to read on through. After all, it wasn't the first time I felt out of place.